Hey, North Georgia Meteorologist Greg Majewski here. You know, myself, a retired 30-year Army veteran, and of course, a meteorologist. You just knew I was going to have to do a movie review on the theatrical release on the movie Pressure. Now, John F. Kennedy in 1961 asked the outgoing President Eisenhower, and of course, the former Supreme Allied Commander in World War II, what gave him the edge in the D-Day invasion. And Eisenhower simply replied, well, our meteorologists were better than the Germans. So our movie begins first on the disastrous dress rehearsal amphibious landing of Exercise Tiger, where hundreds of Allied troops were injured or killed during a friendly fire exchange because of poor communication between British and American forces 6 weeks before D-Day in 1944 in April. The title itself is a play on words, of course, atmospheric pressure, which drives weather, and the mounting pressure on two men in this movie. Brendan Fraser as General Dwight D. Eisenhower, and Andrew Scott playing Dr. James Stagg, someone Winston Churchill called brilliant and the best meteorologist in England. Now, Fraser's portrayal of Eisenhower lends a degree of gravitas to the role and captures the Allied commander's mounting pressure to establish a second front against the Germans in Europe, while also showing the quick outbursts of anger Eisenhower was sometimes prone to do. He also shows a degree of doubt before the invasion, but ultimately it's Eisenhower's care of his troops that drives his motivation. His clashes with Damian Lewis, who played British Field Marshal Montgomery, makes it clear who's ultimately in command and who makes the final decision to go or no go on D-Day. That ultimately falls to Eisenhower. Now, Scott's portrayal of Dr. Stagg is played very cerebrally and a touch of coldness to the character. His only interests are in cold hard facts. He wants the most reliable, up-to-date data to make the most accurate forecast possible. Now, I have to say, as a meteorologist, I loved the response that Stagg gave to Eisenhower when he's constantly asked, are you absolutely sure? And I'm not going to give that away and let you see that in the theater. Now, the movie does an excellent job of showing modern meteorology in its infancy, clashing with older methods of creating forecasts that relied on climatology and history by comparing current storms with those in the past to predict what a current storm is going to do. Now, can you imagine trying to come up with a forecast for the largest amphibious assault in history with hundreds of thousands of troops and thousands of ships and planes without satellites or modern computers modeling to help you? Well, no pressure there. Now, this brings clashes of philosophies when Dr. Stagg arrives on the scene and clashes with the American meteorologist on Eisenhower's staff, Lieutenant Colonel Irving Kirk, played by Chris Messina. The men strongly disagree on what the forecast will bring. Dr. Stagg is warning of catastrophe if the invasion goes forward on the original date of June 5th with bad weather, while Lieutenant Colonel Crick says, no, the weather looks good. The clicking clock, the pacing of the movie mounts the pressure on both Eisenhower and Stagg. Stagg then learns his very pregnant wife has gone into labor and may have been lost in a bombing in London, showing him trying to keep his mind focused on the job at hand while dealing with the potential of a personal loss. Now, Eisenhower ultimately decides to, early on June 4th, on postponing the June 5th D-Day invasion for 2 weeks until June 18th. Then a break occurs. Something unexpected happens to the storm that opens a brief hole in the weather conditions that may allow the invasion to proceed on June 6th. Now, Dr. Stagg and Lieutenant Colonel Crick start to put their differences aside and work together to see if this emerging opportunity is something the Allies can take advantage of. They ultimately convince Eisenhower to begin Operation Overlord on the morning of June 6th, sending the troops in the worst possible weather conditions with the expectation that it will improve once they arrive on the French coast. The movie does throw in some restored high-quality real D-Day images along with some of the best combat cinematography since Saving Private Ryan without being overly grotesque. The supporting cast is solid, and the open credits make it clear this is a true story and not one of those based on a true story Hollywood typically does when they want to indulge the truth. Now, let me just say up front, you do not need to be a meteorologist to enjoy this movie. I took my wife to it, and we both thoroughly enjoyed it. It is well acted, it is well paced, it's got drama, it's got tension. The degree of realism is to be applauded here, and it just kind of opens your eyes to the pressure on these men determining the fate of Europe to liberate it from the Germans in World War II was something not to take lightly, and the role the weather played in making that decision. And for this meteorologist, I give it 5 stars.